lance fournie was a medieval equivalent to the modern army squad that would have accompanied and supported a man-at-arms in battle. These units formed companies under a captain, either as mercenary bands or in the retinue of wealthy nobles and royalty. Each lance was supposed to include a mixture of troop types that would have guaranteed a desirable balance between the various components of the company at large. However, it is often difficult to determine the exact composition of the lance in any given company, as the available sources are few and often centuries apart. A lance was usually led and raised by a knight in the service of his liege, yet it is not uncommon in certain periods to have a less privileged man, such as a sergeant-at-arms, lead a lance. More powerful knights, also known as a knight bannerets, could field multiple lances. Origins. The origins of the lance lie in the retinues of medieval knights. When called by the liege, the knight would command men from his fief and possibly those of his liege lord, or in this latter's stead, out of the Frankish concept of knighthood associated with horsemanship and its arms. A correlation slowly evolved between the signature weapon of this rank, the horseman's lance, and the military value of the rank. In other words, when a noble spoke of his ability to field forces, the terms knights and lances became interchangeable. The lance had no consistent strength of arms throughout its usage as a unit. Different centuries and different states gave it a fluctuating character. However, the basic lance of 3 men, a knight, a squire who served as a fighting auxiliary, and a non-combatant squire, primarily concerned on the battlefield with looking after the knight's spare horses or lancers, seems to evolve in the 13th century. An excellent description to convey its relevance is in how a team of half a dozen men, like the crew of some enormous battle tank. The 13th century French rule of the Templars had specified that a brother knight should have 1 squire if he had 1 war horse, 2 if he had an extra one. In addition, he had a riding horse and a pack horse. In battle, the squires would follow the brothers with the spare war horses. A similar arrangement was also seen in Spain in the 1270s, according to Ramon Llull. Neither horse, nor armor, nor even being chosen by others is sufficient to show forth the high honor that pertains to a knight. Instead, he must be given a squire and a servant to look after his horse organization. France. The term lances fournies itself appeared much the same way as the compagnies d'ordonnance. Les lances fournies pour les compagnies d'ordonnance do, or the lances furnished for the companies ordered by the king. Upon the original establishment of the French compagnies d'ordonnance, the lances fournies were formed around a man-at-arms with a retinue of a page, a squire, 2 or 3 archers, and a lighter horseman known as the sergeant-at-arms, a coutelier. All members in a lance were mounted for travel, but only the man-at-arms and the coutelier were regularly expected to fight on horseback, though of course both members were also trained and equipped for dismounted action. Lancers would be further organized as companies, each company numbering about 100 lancers, effectively 400 plus fighting men and servants. These companies were sustained even in peace, and became the first standing army in modern Europe. Burgundy. The last Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Bold, made a number of ordinances prescribing the organization of his forces in the 1460s and 1470s. In the first ordinance of 1468, the army is clearly organized in 3-man lances, a man-at-arms, a coutelier and a valet. In the Abbeville Ordinance of 1471, the army is reorganized into 1250 lances of 9 men each, a man-at-arms, a coutelier, a non-combatant page, 3 mounted archers and 3 foot soldiers. This organization is repeated in the 1472 and 1473 Ordinances Brittany. The Duchy of Brittany also ordered the equivalent of the lance in an ordinance of 1450. while the basic lance was the familiar three-man structure, of man-at-arms, couturier and page. Dependent on the wealth of the man-at-arms, additional archers or jusarmias were added. At the highest income band specified, either 4 archers, or 3 archers and a jusarmia, were added to the basic unit. Italy. In Italy in the 14th and 15th centuries, mercenary soldiers were recruited in units known variously as barbuzza, lancer, corazza, consisting of 2 to 6 men, although it is traditionally thought that the 3-man lance was introduced to Italy by the mercenaries of the White Company in the 1360s. In fact, they had evolved somewhat earlier. The 3-man lance consisted of 2 combatants, a man-at-arms and an armed squire, plus a page. Occasionally a mounted archer could be substituted for the squire. In the mid-15th century, soldiers called lanzpezzi evolved. These were men who, for some reason, had become detached from the mercenary companies and the lances and were now hired as individuals. They were then placed in new companies and lances under a new commander. Germany. In Germany, an indigenous form of the lance known as a glaive developed. A glaive may have consisted of as many as 10 men, both horse and foot soldiers, supporting the knight. The 3-man glaive may have existed in the early 14th century, with a knight supported by 2 sergeants. Later the sergeants were replaced by mercenaries. The equivalent of the lance of 2 combatants with pages seen in Germany in the later 14th century, when the second combatant can be a spearman or an archer. However, in various regions, other sizes of glaive existed of up to 10 men, including up to 3 mounted archers and armed servants who acted as infantry. Poland. Copia was the basic military formation in medieval Poland, identical to the lance unit employed elsewhere in Western Europe. A copia was composed of a knight and his retinue. On campaign, several copias were combined to form a larger unit, the collegiate. For the 15th century the term copia was replaced by poggio,